What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. We are going to talk Buckeyes today, and we have an exciting but somewhat somber show to discuss, or topics to discuss, I should say, on this week's show, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, please make sure you have alerts turned on, hit that thumbs up button so you know every time we post a video. If you've been following along, you know we've got all of our interviews from player interviews with coaches and whatnot. So you don't want to miss that. Plus, all of our podcasts go up on that as well. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple or any of those podcast platforms, please leave a 5-star review, comments. All of that is very helpful. And today we're going with a seltzer, something easy to drink, a White Claw Mango. My favorite of the White Claws personally. Just easy. Switching it up a little bit from the usual beer of the last few weeks. I don't know. I like to change it up every once in a while. Plus, I have a bunch of these here in a cooler. So today, I mentioned it's going to be a little bit of not a somber may not be the right word, but we're going to be saying sort of goodbye to Bill Kurelic. If you missed the announcement, earlier this week, Bill is going to retire next month, and we're going to miss him, as we will talk about. But we're going to have Bill on to discuss his career, his decision, all of that. But also, we announced earlier this week, we bring in Garrick Hodge, who previously worked at 11 Warriors and other outlets. So we will get him on here after Bill to sort of introduce him to Bucknuts people. If you aren't familiar with his work on 11 Warriors, get some background on him and really kind of let him talk some ball, talk some recruiting, and get to know him a little bit. Garrick's somebody that I've gotten to know over the last few years as he's worked with 11 Warriors. Really excited to have him. So let's get into it. And without further ado, we bring in the man himself, Bill Kurelic, still of Bucknuts, but not for that much longer. Bill, glad to have you on again. I don't know how many more of these we'll do. You're always welcome, but I don't know, once you hit retirement, I'm not sure you're ever going to want to talk to us again.
Well, a couple things there. Pushing me out the door a little bit on the way. That's to start with. No, you would never do that. And second, somebody actually brought that up on our message board. They said, would you come back at least every couple months and make an appearance somehow? And I got to thinking about it. And I said, well, that certainly could happen. I had not really thought about it, but certainly would not rule that out. I love Bucknuts and have loved working here.
Well, I have never retired, nor do I know much about it. My mother sort of retired. She just stopped being a lawyer and decided to go to med school. So I'm not sure if that's really a retirement. She has since decided that she's just going to help raise my niece with my sister and her husband. So I guess that's her version of retirement. So I don't have much advice for you, but I think you should do whatever you want to do. And if that means popping by Bucknuts every once in a while, then great. And if it means not, then we've had you for a long time. So people have certainly gotten their fill, but you need to enjoy whatever is this next chapter of your life. That is for sure.
Well, I will definitely be on Bucknuts because I won't stop reading Bucknuts. I have so much enjoyed over I've been a Bucknuts 18 years, and over that time span, so much enjoyed the people I've worked with. And like I said on our podcast on Tuesday, I may not miss all of the hard work, so to speak. Hopefully I worked hard. But I may not miss all of that, but I will definitely miss the people. So I will be on Bucknuts reading you guys and looking at our message board. And just from a writing standpoint, that'll be the big change.
Now you just have to pay for an account too, instead of getting one for being an employee.
But yeah, I don't know what I would do with that. It's I've never paid for a Bucknuts account, that's for sure, but it is worth it if you do.
Yeah. Good plug there. All right, Bill. So I'm sure most of the people who are listening or watching this saw your announcement on Tuesday. But for those who maybe haven't, or if you want to explain a little bit more, why is this the right time? Why did you make this call and decide that now was the time to head off into retirement?
Because I'm old. Right here on my shirt, right here actually on my shirt, old guys rule. My wife, my wonderful wife, got this shirt for me, and so I guess she was pushing me into retirement.
Right.
But no, that's not true. Although she did get me this shirt, that part is true. But as far as why, I just felt like it was the right time. As you know, because we've had a lot of conversations, you and I, about this in the past few months. I basically made the decision in early June that I was going to retire. But I really wanted to think about it for a while before I got even more serious and started the process of doing that. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt really good about it, that it was the right time. And why the right time? I guess a number of reasons, besides the age part. When you get to be 68, I think, as I've been told, your window for kind of doing things, doing some traveling and having good health still, and doing more than working is maybe between the ages of 65 to 75 to 80. So I'm 68 now, and this is kind of my window, and I didn't want to miss that window. Hopefully, as far as my mind goes, hopefully I could still work when I'm 75 or 80, but that wouldn't leave much time for kind of doing other things as far as physically. I just felt like this was the time. And, somebody asked me about that on the message board too. They said, did NIL and money that has come into the game play a part, or a big part? I said it was a factor, but there was a lot of factors. But I guess generally speaking, my wife and I have been able to retire for a while now. We had not done that, and I just felt like this was the right time to take advantage of while I'm still good in good health, and make the move. And I felt like I have enough things that I can do to not be bored. And I talked with a friend of mine just this week who's been retired for a while, and he said, I think you're going to find that you'll have a whole lot of stuff that you can do. And my first year of coaching and teaching, I at Dublin High School, second year, I was the head softball coach, and a girl that played for me that year retired a couple years ago, and I saw her post on Facebook. It's amazing how I could have ever had time. How'd she put it? How I could have ever had time to work. With all the things she has to do still in retirement. So it just kind of made me feel like, I'm going to find enough stuff to do for sure.
Speaking of things you want to do, what's on the agenda? I know you're coaching your grandson in T-ball, but what else do you have sort of planned now that you won't have to be calling recruits and going to camps and all that stuff?
First big game tonight. The King Shark Cobras, which is my team, is taking on the what are they called? The Navy Ship Wheels, I think, or something along. I thought,
cheers to those guys.
This is like minor league baseball names. The kids named their own team, and our kids named ours the Cobra Sharks. So so that'll be our first game tonight. And you better get your tickets quick because they're going fast. It's in Westerville at 5:30 tonight. So I'll have my audition for my first time I've coached T-ball in 28 years since my son, Matt, played T-ball. And Matt is the assistant coach on this team. So I am really looking forward to tonight in our first T-ball game, and hopefully keeping them out of the dirt and playing ball, not playing in the dirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of getting back to coaching a little bit. spending more time with my wife and our 3 kids who are now growing up and all have families, all have kids of their own. So spending a little bit more time with my 7 grandchildren. Hopefully staying very active, I run a lot. I try to work out and try to do more of that. And I was an industrial arts teacher, so I like to make things. I finished completely finished the basement in the first house we ever had built. And when I say completely finished, I mean everything. I did the drywall, electricity, plumbing, everything. And if you came into our house, which you have been to our house,
Yes.
you see the furniture I'm sitting at, I made that furniture. So, I like doing that kind of thing. And a lot over the years, being really busy with recruiting, a lot of jobs have creeped up on me that I can do around the house as far as fixing things and taking care of our house and all that. So that's another thing. And just kind of doing things I enjoy. Maybe I want to go to a Columbus Clippers game, for instance, or a Cleveland Indians game. I still call them Indians. I don't have to worry about working. I just go do that and just doing things like that.
Yeah, must be nice.
While you're working away.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of your work, let's sort of reflect back. You wrote again in your written piece sort of about how you came up with the idea to be an Ohio State recruiting expert. Maybe not expert at the time, but you turned into one. For those people who maybe didn't read that piece, take them back to when you're down in Texas and you make the decision that this could be something that you might do going forward.
Yeah, my first year after I graduated from Ohio State was to take a teaching and coaching job in Houston, Texas. Alief-Elsick High School, suburban Houston at that time. I was coaching and teaching, and I was single, had an apartment. Came home one day and had my Sports Illustrated. It was delivered to your house in those days. Maybe it still is. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's the magazine, not the website, right?
Exactly. Yep. There was not a website in those days. But sat down and saw an article titled "Call Them the Cub Scouts." It was about there weren't many of them, about the 5 or 6 guys in the recruiting business. I read it and I thought, I've always loved football, basketball recruiting. I might want to do that someday. So I kept that article and still have it for that matter, as you know. Then as I moved back to Columbus and became the head basketball and head boys basketball and head girls softball coach at Dublin High School, now Dublin Kaufman. After many years of doing that, I just kind of thought it might be time to do something different. And I had that article. I thought, maybe I want to try the recruiting business. I had my own idea, not to do a national thing like people were doing in those days, the few that were doing it. I didn't really care about some kid that was in Oregon that wasn't considering Ohio State, and Ohio State wasn't considering him. I thought, I want to read about just kids that are realistic Ohio State guys, that they're recruiting and are interested in Ohio State. So I started a publication, Ohio Football Recruiting News, just about kids in Ohio and then kids nationally Ohio State was recruiting. After a couple of years, it didn't make money. I almost gave it up. The third year, it made some money. And if it hadn't, I was going to give it up and just go back to teaching, coaching. But it made some money and continued forward. And I guess here we are 40 years later.
Were you doing that while teaching?
I was not coaching at that point. I had decided to stop coaching. We'd come off a really good season. We were 21-2, and I decided if I ever wanted to stop coaching and get into something else, this was a good time to try it because everything went perfectly that season. Not just winning games, but there just weren't any bad things that happened that season. I kept teaching, but I wasn't coaching, which freed up a lot of time. Sure. I mean, a lot of time. So I started my print publication while teaching, and I taught for a few more years while the business became established. And then after it became established, I got out of teaching and coaching altogether. Well, I did keep coaching. I coached on the AAU scene, basketball, and coached softball and the travel leagues and all that kind of stuff. And so I did continue to kind of get back into coaching at some point in there.
Do you remember the first recruit you contacted?
Whew.
I told you I was going to test your memory.
Yeah. I don't know exactly who it was, but if I had to guess, I would say it might have been Kirk Herbstreit, because I do know for sure my first publication that I put out there for sale, so to speak, print publication, the number one player in Ohio the guy I had as the number one player in Ohio that year was Kirk Herbstreit. So, he may have been the first I contacted, but I can't say that for sure.
All right. Obviously, these days, the recruiting's different. There's lots of people doing it. We have entire staffs at 24/7 Sports. Not only someone like you who covers a specific team, but our national guys, our regional guys. How did you go about scouting were you just going to every game you possibly could to get a sense of, like you said, who are the best players in Ohio?
Yeah, there was no internet, of course, in those days. And, the coverage was sparse, I would say. Newspapers did not cover recruiting much. They did, the Columbus Dispatch and Citizen Journal those days did it a little bit. So really, I kind of used every means I could, I guess you'd say. I went out to high schools. I went out and saw kids in practices and games. I talked to high school coaches. I talked to college coaches. Obviously, I talked to any coaches, Ohio State, other schools that I could. I wanted to get as many different opinions as I could. So I did a decent amount of traveling. And in those days, there were no cell phones. Spent a lot of time on the rotary dial phone. And if you're not older, you probably don't remember those days, but they did exist. And high school games obviously were not on TV in those days, and they weren't on the internet. So the only way you could see kids play was to actually go see them yourself.
Did you have issues sort of getting in with people? Whether it be high school people, Ohio State, whoever it was, just as you're starting out and building your name, did it take a little bit to get sort of the connections to get to talk to the people you wanted to?
Yeah. I think, 35 years later, I'm not sure most of the coaches know me even now. I don't know, but back then, the first few coaches I called, they didn't know who I was. I just knew that they were the head coach at Bell Fountain or Lakota West or Cleveland St. Ignatius or whatever. So it was an introductory process for sure. And I kind of had to explain what I'm doing and why, and kind of get the ball rolling, so to speak. It was done over the phone and to actually, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'd like to come out to your high school and watch you guys practice. I'd like to come to your games, that type of thing. And certainly it was an arduous project in those days, getting started.
Who are some of the guys over the years that you built relationships with on the recruiting trail that sort of stand out? Maybe because of their recruitment, maybe because of, just their relationship with you. But who are some names that always come to your mind when you think about past, recruitments you covered?
Now Pat, you've led in perfectly to my this Saturday morning feature on Bucknuts. I'm going to I'm going to do an article on my 10 favorite recruits that signed with Ohio State from the 2025, 2024, and 2023 classes.
You covered more recruiting than that.
What's that?
You covered recruiting way longer than that.
Yeah. Well, and why those were my favorite from those classes. And if people like it, then I'll do the next one on classes, 3 or 4 classes before that or whatever. But one of the guys that'll be in there and certainly would be up on my among my favorites all time would be Luke Montgomery. Montgomery, just a tremendous family. Luke and Ryan and their dad Mike, and they're just a great family. So they would certainly be in there. And Maurice Hall, I don't think that's probably a name before your time, a running back from Columbus Brookhaven. I don't know if were you covering Ohio State when Maurice was playing?
No, but I was watching Ohio State.
Okay. Well, when I say before your time, I meant since you've been covering Ohio State. What a great young man. I mean, I smiled every time I called or talked to Maurice Hall. More recently, Jack Sawyer. Loved talking with that young man. And, I could go on and on. I mean, there's been so many great players that I've had the honor of talking to and being a part of their recruitment. And it's just been a lot of fun with a lot of great young men.
Was there a biggest surprise, whether it's a guy who committed to Ohio State, a guy who didn't commit to Ohio State, that just pops out to you when you think back over some of these recruiting battles?
Yeah, one of the biggest surprises was a guy that didn't end up going to Ohio State, Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had that guy pegged to Ohio State. All the crystal balls, and I don't even remember for sure. I think Rivals at that time had I forget what future forecast, I think they call it. I think they had their thing. That everybody had him going to Ohio State. And for that matter, at 247 Sports, we had the article written, quotes and everything from Bijan of why he was going to Ohio State. The fact that he ended up not going to Ohio State, that was a pretty big shocker. In fact, I remember that well. I got up on I didn't get up. It was a Sunday morning, and I was actually sleeping in a little bit later than usual. I get a call about 8 o'clock, and I look and see who that's from. I said, whoa, this is not a person that would usually call me at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, and this is a pretty clued-in person for Ohio State recruiting. I said, for this person to call me I was in bed still, but on Sunday morning, this has got to be really important. So I answered it, and he said, Bill, Bijan Robinson's not. Bijan was 2 days. I think it was 2 days, 3 days away from announcing that he's going to Ohio State. So Bill, Bijan's not going to Ohio State. I said, what? He said, he's not going to Ohio State. I said, I can't put that out there unless you are absolute. You got it. I can't be wrong on this one. It's too big a deal. He said he's not going to Ohio State. And I wasn't totally shocked because a source that had told me all along that be careful with this one because he's got some family that don't want him to go that far away from college for college. So I posted it on our message board that he's not going to Ohio State. I said, I don't know where he's going, probably Texas, but I named 1 or 2 other schools, but he's not going to Ohio State. And by the end of the day, if I remember right, that post had over 200,000 views on it. And by the end of the day, every crystal ball or future guy, whatever prediction, I had switched mine right away that morning. Mm-hmm. Every single prediction by the end of that day had been taken off Ohio State. And as we know, it turned out he signed with Texas. So that's one of the biggest surprises of my time. And unfortunately, it wasn't a good surprise for the Buckeyes.
Right. You mentioned having the story written, and this will be the last one I ask you, though we could go on with these stories for a while. But how many stories do you think you wrote about kids committing that you never published?
Sometimes I'm pretty sure that a kid is going to Ohio State. Sometimes I know he's going to Ohio State. Sometimes I think he's going to Ohio State. So I try to be ready. They don't all go to Ohio State. Again, it's always nicer when I know they're going to Ohio State. And there's been a lot of those, but certainly not all of them. I don't know, maybe 5% of the commitment stories I've ever done have ended up, not being published. I'm just taking a kind of a wild guess.
All right, Bill, like I said, we could do this for probably a couple hours listening to you tell stories. But you've got to get back to work before you actually retire. So I do want to say, and I put this on our message board, we're going to miss you. I'm going to miss you. You and I have become very good friends over the last 9 or so years that I've been at Bucknuts. And, even before that, I was reading your work and whatnot. So everyone will miss you, and we appreciate all you've done, but you certainly deserve to enjoy your retirement, as we were talking about before. And I appreciate everything you've done to help me and, everything you've done covering this, because I don't know if there's an Ohio State recruiting situation as early as there was if you don't decide to do that back in the day. So thank you from everybody for that.
Well, Pat hasn't mentioned it, everyone out there on this podcast, but he has helped me along the way since he's been at Bucknuts more than anyone out there will ever know. I mean, I have really counted on Pat, and I will say that Pat is a rising star in this business. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. He is not only has been a good friend and a huge help to me, but he's just really, really good at what he does, and he is a great worker. And Pat's a rising star in this business.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, but this is about you, so I'll cut that part from the.
No, please don't.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you for coming on. I wanted to kind of reflect on your career. I think we were able to do that, though. It was a long career, so we didn't hit on everything, but we got through some highlights. So appreciate you taking time to do this.
Well, if more than a few people watch this, maybe we'll do a little more here in the coming weeks or so.
Sure. There's no football game next week, so
that's true.
We could.
I appreciate it, Pat.
Yep. All right. Talk to you later, Bill.
Okay. Take care.
Bye. All right. Thanks to Bill Kurelic for jumping on here on the Bucknuts Happy Hour. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button. Turn on the bell for notifications so you can get all our videos. And if you're listening to this as a podcast on whichever platform it is, please leave us a 5-star review, comments, all that. Well, we will miss Bill. The show must go on, as they say, and we're excited about where we're going next. And part of that situation is because we've brought in Garrick Hodge, formerly of 11 Warriors, now a member of the Bucknuts family. Garrick, what's going on, my guy?
I'm just living the dream. Yourself, Patrick?
Oh, I'm good. Just Thursday before the OU game. So exciting stuff. Garrick, you and I have gotten to know each other over the years since you've been on the recruiting beat at Ohio State. But I don't know how many people out there, whether they followed your work at 11 Warriors or not, sort of know how you got into the journalism business, the recruiting business. So let's start just back, what made you want to get into sports writing from the beginning, and how did it all kind of start for you? Because I know everyone kind of has their own story.
Yeah, sure. That's
easy one to start.
I'm dating myself, right? But I guess the too long don't read version is just really wanted to do a career in sports, and obviously one look at me says that I'm not going to have one successful playing career on the field, so I better figure out how to make one off of it. And I always enjoyed writing. I always enjoyed talking to several people about the intricacies of the sports industry. I can't say that I came too much into recruiting until about 4 or 5 years ago. All my jobs in the field, I guess I'm getting a bit ahead here, but went to college for it, studied broadcast journalism, minored in journalism, figured out, I'm probably better at writing than I am speaking, but it's good to have experience in both, right?
Yeah.
But so long story short, I'm from Illinois. I think Ohio is now the 7th state I've lived in my life. And after having been born and raised in Illinois and gone to college in Illinois, the first 22. So it's been kind of a journey. Been in Kansas, North, South Dakota, which quite frankly helped me a bit in the Lincoln Keenholz saga when they were recruiting him. Clued into some high school guys up there. Then went to Missouri, covered Mizzou for a little bit. Then went to Mississippi State for 2 years, covered the Bulldogs, including Mike Leach's first year, RIP Pirate. But, those two roles were more kind of serving as the sports editor / quasi-writer for covering those two SEC schools. But, yeah, I joined 11 Warriors in the summer of 2021. Was kind of a hybrid role between recruiting and helping in on like other stuff, whether it be video, photography, some team pieces here and there, but mostly recruiting. And that was the first time I had ever covered recruiting full time. And while I obviously had covered it to some extent, when you cover a beat, you have to know the players coming in and to a certain degree. It was my introduction to how chaotic the industry is. And I picked a really interesting time to get into it because that summer was the beginning of NIL. So while it certainly has escalated to a level that's unrecognizable from 5 years ago, I've never known anything but recruiting in the NIL. So I don't necessarily have some of that, I guess, wear and tear that other recruiting guys have when they had covered it in different generations. And believe me, I don't begrudge them for it at all. But nonetheless, I just find recruiting fascinating. I love seeing guys go from 16 years old into all Big Ten players, all SEC players. I think it's just fascinating where guys start, where they end up, how they progress over their careers, the stories behind these young men. I am super excited to join Bucknuts and probably equally as excited to work with Patrick Murphy.
Oh, come on. Let's not lie to the people now. Just kidding. You mentioned, kind of getting into it. What was when you got here, when you started with 11 Warriors, you're trying to break in on the recruiting scene. Obviously, there's a lot of people doing it, Bill being one of them. What was the toughest thing you think for you initially as you first broke into full-time, or more or less full-time covering recruiting?
I think just understanding the grand scale of it. I mean, the previous 2 college beats I've been on, they were competitive, don't get me wrong. Sure. But Ohio State's the biggest college beat and arguably one of the biggest football beats in America out there. There's probably a couple pro beats that are bigger, but not many. Yeah. If there's a college beat as big, maybe there is, but there certainly isn't one that's bigger, right? And so when you get on the beat, you try to kind of approach it the same way you did when you covered the other stuff. Okay, what worked, start building relationships. And then you're like, oh, there's a lot of people that are trying to build relationships, right? So you have to try to identify different ways to stand out. You have to sometimes acknowledge I may write the same story as somebody else. It just is what it is. There is going to be some overlap. If that's the case, live with it. It's fine. But no, and I guess recruiting in general, like you knew that there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, but you don't really know how much happens behind the scenes until you're in the nitty-gritty of it, right? So all of that was kind of, my first year, I'll be completely honest, kicked my ass. It was a humbling experience. I think I got adjusted okay, but that first year certainly worked my tail off, but it definitely I know a lot of players get asked the question, what was your welcome to Ohio State moment? I can't identify quite exactly what my welcome to the Ohio State beat moment was, but I know I had one.
Sure.
There's a lot of other guys, Bill included, that would write something, and I would think to myself, gosh darn it, I really wish I would have thought of that and wrote that. But I learned, and I guess that landed me to be coworkers with Pat.
Yeah. No, I think that's funny you say that. I had similar, as I was first getting into it, interning with the Ozone, which doesn't even really exist much anymore. I had similar thoughts of like, oh, that would have been a good idea. Or someone would ask a question in a press conference and it's like, oh, that's just a better way of asking what I wanted to ask, So there's growing moments, right? I think that's very normal. You mentioned Mike Leach, and I know you've told me some stories about that. An interesting time, I imagine, in your professional life. What can you share about covering him for that year?
Well, I covered him in the COVID season, so it wasn't exactly the traditional Mike Leach experience, I'm sure. The only thing that really felt like true Mike Leach was, when he was introduced, it was like probably about, 2 months before the world officially stopped for a while. And his introductory press conference, he wore a suit and he's just up there saying like, oh yeah, this is one of the only times you're ever going to see me in these. So read them and weep now. And then, he had a lot of one-liners. I think the first question I asked him in the press conference was if people remember, he went on ESPN and he raved about the visiting locker room of Mississippi State. And this is while he was at Washington State, about just how I I guess for lack of a better term, terrible of a setting it was for an opponent. And I can't remember quite specifics why, but I asked him because they had since remodeled it since he had been there. So I asked him if he visited it and if it had met up to the expectations. And he just laughed and just went on, for a 3-minute rant about how he missed the tenacious intent and really appreciate. I guess malicious intent is the word he used now that I think about it, but just really appreciated how he called it the best visiting locker room in college football. And Mike Leach was always good for a one-liner, and he always had thoughts that separated himself from other college football coaches. And the sad thing about his passing, aside from, the impact it had on his loved ones, of course, is I just don't know if there's going to be another Mike Leach in college football because he truly was one of a kind.
Yeah, probably not. He's a unique one for sure. And I only ever, saw him from afar, but that's cool that you got to at least experience some of that. How did you come about the job at 11 Warrior? I mean, I assume you applied like everyone else, but how did it come on your radar? What was your thought about coming to Columbus, covering Ohio State, all that?
I think it was just on a message board for journalism jobs, and I just happened to see it and put my application in, not expecting to hear a whole lot, and then got a call back, had a couple Zoom interviews, and one thing led to another, and eventually I was in Columbus. But in terms of joining Columbus, my sister was getting her doctorate in chemistry at the time, and I mean, she had said nothing but wonderful things about the city and being at Ohio State, and now she's a chemist, so it clearly turned out pretty well for her. But I mean, I had always known of Ohio State. They're one of the biggest brands, if not the biggest brand in college football. So, do I want to write about Ohio State? Well, let me think about it. Tough decision, right? But once you got the official offer and had the opportunity to make the move, and me being a Midwest guy and grew up in Illinois, get a little bit closer to home than I was in Mississippi, it was kind of a no-brainer from there.
You touched on some of the other places you've covered. Are there stories that stand out from any of those times, any of those places that you think would be interesting for people?
Should have prepared me for this one, but the only one that comes to mind is it isn't one that will make the rounds anywhere. It was a high school game in South Dakota. It was the most frustrated I've ever seen a kid. And I guess this kind of ties into recruiting, because one of my favorite things about it is when you get to go see these guys in action on Friday night, you get to kind of get a taste for their personalities a little bit as you be a fly on the wall and kind of watch them, the game play out and how they react with their coaches and their teammates, all that sort of good stuff. Right. And, this kid in South Dakota was unfortunately on the losing end of a half that was going very poorly. I believe they were down 42-0 at the time. So,
ouch.
Yeah, right. And so in an effort to kind of stabilize the situation, the head coach pulls him aside, puts an arm around him, brings it over. He's like, all right, I know you're frustrated. What play do you want to run next drive? Try to get us going. He looked him dead in the eye and said, I want to run a play that expletive works. And I probably laughed a little harder than I should have at that. But no, that when you think of just hilarity moments and things like that, that's probably the thing that stands to mind.
And I don't know how much people, I think people see what we do when we're covering Ohio State. You see, the stuff that gets put on camera. Covering high school sports is a whole different animal. I've only done it a little bit. But if you're not familiar, when you go to high school games, you don't know if there's going to be Wi-Fi. You don't know if there's going to be, where you're going to sit, where all those type of things. It can be quite the challenge. Do you have any horror stories from going out to high school games or trying to meet coaches, kids, anything like that don't show up? Just anything that might have not gone the way you expected in covering high school recruiting?
Yes. My very first game in South Dakota, again, I was primarily covering preps and small colleges, and I joined the South Dakota paper at the time. I want to say it was in mid-October, right? So my very first day was on a Friday. I was covering a game, and I went to this small town, couldn't have been more than 1,500 people in it, right? It was school that had to consolidate with other schools to field a team, and they played what was called 9-man football. I'm sure there's very similar versions of the sport throughout other lowly populated states. But so I was covering a 9-man football game, and of course I'm going, okay, he's lining up there. How's this working? And I'm like, growing up in Illinois and playing a sport myself, I'm like, I've never heard of such a thing. So I was more fascinated by that than anything else than maybe, the basics of, all right, where are you going to send your story from? The story needs to be in X amount of time, blah, 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 blah. I was just so fascinated by the mystique of this mysterious 9-man football that when the game got done, I did all my interviews. I had my notes. And then I'm like, okay, great. And then I realized there wasn't internet within, at least public internet for me, I should say, within 35 miles. And I was getting close on my deadline. So I had a oh bleep moment, sprinted to my car. And the only thing that saved me and had me hit deadline by the skin of my teeth was that I drove a Chevy at the time. And at the time I prescribed to the Wi-Fi in my truck. So I typed up what was probably a very garbage story and submitted it to my editor, who was probably less than pleased with my antics. And thanks to Chevy I know Chevy took a beating because everyone was like, why would you have Wi-Fi in a truck? Who the hell's going to use that? Well, it saved my butt that night. I can tell you that.
Yeah. No, it's a good tool to have. I once went to a game where there was no press box, just no press box. So I just sat in the stands. In the second half, I just stood on the sidelines with my laptop out, just sort of typing with one finger in between plays. I once wrote in a B-Dubs parking lot because that was the closest place to get Wi-Fi. So those are fun stories. Okay, Garrick. Well, I just wanted to bring you on, let people kind of get to know you a little bit. I know you are a Cubs, White Sox fan. Anything else outside of the Ohio State recruiting sphere you want these people to know?
Whoa, a Cubs White Sox fan?
Sorry.
What?
Sorry, White Sox Bears. That's what I meant to say.
Louise, Pat.
I was just making sure you were paying attention.
It's my first podcast with you, and you're putting me into cardiac arrest.
Yes. So you don't need to talk about those teams because we know how they're doing. But anything else people should know about Garrick outside of his professional day-to-day job?
I have 2 dogs. People love dogs. I have a yellow Labrador Retriever named Staley the Bear. Technically I named him Staley the dog, but we just call him Staley, my girlfriend and I. And she has 2 cats. I like to say she has the cats. So there is a lot of animals roaming around at all times, and it was completely chaotic at first. And the first weekend, I was like, once it got to 4, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to survive this, but it's a wonderful mess at the end of it. Big animal guy, love animals for obvious reasons, of course. But so, yeah, I'm unfortunately also kind of a nerd, both in football and outside of things. And, and the thing you're waiting for me to say is I'm the staff aficionado of mac and cheese. So
you do love mac and cheese.
Yes.
I have witnessed that. And a giant plate of mac and cheese at a bowl game. That was one of my fondest memories of you. Though we will make more going forward now that you're with us. I'm excited you're with us. You've already put up some great stuff on the site. So if people haven't checked it out yet, your work is up and available. Garrick, thanks for jumping on, my man. I appreciate it. And I hope now people know a little bit more about you as they set off to read your recruiting coverage over the next however long it is. Maybe you'll be here as long as Bill.
Hey, you never know. But never call me a Cubs fan again, otherwise I won't be.
Yeah, that will be the end of that. That is my apologies. But yeah, I mean, the Cubs, White Sox, they're really all the same, right?
Yeah. All right, I'm leaving. Goodbye.
All right, thanks, Garrick. All right, thanks again to Garrick and Bill for both jumping on. I apologize for confusing the Chicago sports teams that Garrick supports. It gets hard sometimes when he just complains about all of them, so they all kind of run together. I wanted to focus on both of those guys. sort of the departing Bill Kurelic and the arriving Garrick Hodge. But I do want to talk about this week's game a little bit before we end this podcast and just kind of what to expect from Saturday. It's been an interesting start to the season for Ohio State because obviously week one, you had this big Texas game that you knew was going to be a difficult, challenging, game against the top-ranked team in the preseason, all that. And then you have this, steep drop-off in terms of competition to Grambling State last week, and you all know how that went. And now you kind of climb back up to Ohio in terms of the level you're going to face. And I guess the question that I've been asking, sort of, at least myself, is like, how high back up are you going to go? Obviously, Ohio is not Texas, but they have been good. I've watched both the games. They gave Rutgers a hell of a game 2 weeks ago at Rutgers, and it was fourth. The game was tied. I think it was 31-31 going into the fourth quarter, and then last weekend, I'm sure everyone is aware at this point, they pull off the upset against West Virginia. I mean, that game could have been worse. Parker Navarro, the quarterback for OU, throws 3 interceptions. It could have been a lot worse if they don't turn the ball over there and make some plays. But from watching the Bobcats, like I mentioned, Parker Navarro, he's a guy that should be interesting. I will be interested to see how Ohio State's defense handles him. Obviously, they played 2 decently mobile quarterbacks already. Arch Manning, we saw him get free once for, I think it was like a 15-yard scramble, but he was able to move around in the pocket. You saw the same last week with Toussaint and whatnot. But I think Parker Navarro is more of the true dual threat. He'll take off and run. He did it a lot against West Virginia. So I think you will see that sort of test this defense because he's a real athlete and he can throw. Is it perfect? No, but he's kind of that gunslinger mentality. He'll put it up there. And some of the throws he made against West Virginia were really impressive, where it's like leaving his hand and you're like, oh no. And then there's the guy there, or it's on the money. Now, some of the throws weren't. There's a reason he is at OU. He there's some inconsistencies there. But he will test, I think, this Buckeye defense a little bit and give us sort of a different look because he is more a true dual threat guy. And he can, hurt the Buckeyes potentially with his legs and arms if they're not careful. I'm interested to see how Matt Patricia handles that because while you see some of that in the NFL, especially when Matt Patricia was there, your Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes to some degree. When you look at most of the quarterbacks that Matt Patricia faced during his NFL career, it's not quite that dual threat level. There are some of those guys. I don't know what Matt Patricia's record was against Michael Vick, say, but I'm sure they faced each other. So just what does he have cooked up? Because he's had different things for each week so far. I think obviously you had to show quite a bit against Texas, but then against Grambling, they did some things. That I keep highlighting the Caleb Downs interception where he lines up basically as a blitzing linebacker in between, a 3-man front in between the tackle and the end. And, he ends up dropping out into coverage. Sonny Styles comes up the middle, forces the pressure, interception for Caleb Downs, like stuff like that. I think you continue to see more and more interesting things from Matt Patricia. And I imagine you'll see more just how he handles the dual threat ability. And then on the other side of the ball, I think they did a really good job of like third downs and Ryan Day actually talked about this, but this is something I noted when I was watching them, getting West Virginia into 3rd and long situations. And then they were able to make plays out of that. So, can you avoid those situations? Can you being Ohio State, stay out of those sort of dangerous moments where, okay, now we're at 3rd and 10 instead of 3rd and 2. And, now OU can do some different things defensively to try and get you off the field. And on the other side, you've got to get OU off the field. There were, I don't know the numbers exactly, but they made a number of plays on 3rd down, even 4th down against West Virginia. They kind of kept them in the game, especially in the first half. So you got to get them off the field. Like 3rd down is going to be crucial for the Buckeyes on both sides of the ball. Can you keep it? If you're in 3rd down offensively, can you pick those up? If ideally you'd like to pick up a 1st down quicker, so 1st or 2nd down. But if you aren't third down, is it third and short? Is it, manageable? And then on the other side, can you get them off the field? And I think that's where Parker Navarro's legs will be tricky. Is if he doesn't have something there, the Buckeyes have to have good rush discipline and try and keep him in the pocket. But he's really good at escaping that pocket, getting downfield with his legs. And once he goes, he's pretty quick. He's got spin moves and things like that. So I think he will certainly, at least a couple times, probably get free against this Buckeye defense. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will be able to contain him. I just think back over the years to mobile quarterbacks making plays. Now, that was a Jim Knowles defense. Matt Patricia, like I said, may have something cooked up, but I still think sometimes these dual threat quarterbacks, even if you play them really well, they're able to make at least a few plays. Ultimately, I don't think it will be enough to, make this too much of a scare. Now, I don't think it will be a game anywhere near like the final score against Grambling. I think OU is certainly more talented and will be able to compete with the Buckeyes better than what the Tigers did last weekend. But I also don't think this will be anywhere near, the Texas game, right? I think Ohio State should be able to move the ball. I think if you look, some of the West Virginia players were able to get free. There were a couple times when I'm watching that game back and I'm thinking, if that's Ohio State, that's probably, a run or a play gets free and they just get caught or take a bad angle. And the defender is able to come over. I think Ohio State will be able to make some big plays in this game. I don't know if they'll leave Jeremiah Smith as open as Grambling did. I would advise against it if you're listening and you're someone on the OU staff. Like, that's a guy I don't want to beat us. But you've seen from the Buckeyes, Carnell Tate, 2 games. I think he's been maybe the star of the offense thus far, or at least sort of a breakout star, if you didn't consider last year a breakout for him. We're still waiting to see Max Clare really get going. Will Kazmarek, I'll have a story on him and playing against his former team on Bucknuts today. That's an interesting thing. He obviously caught his first touchdown against Grambling last week. Can he be an impact, either blocking or receiving? So you've got those. Can Brandon Innes get going? That's a guy he had last week against Grambling, had 3 catches for 29 yards. Just hasn't been as explosive as I think most people expected. I think it's there. I'm not worried about Brandon Innes, but I am worried a little bit on his decisions on punt return and when to field them, when to not. Ryan Day's talked about this a little bit this week too. So we'll see if he stays back there. I think he will, but I do think he needs to make better decisions. But in terms of his receiving, I think the plays will come. I think we've seen enough to know that is the case. And then the run game. I know obviously last week, Bo Jackson, second half, breaks 108 yards, a touchdown, has the big 51-yard run. Was against Grambling's backup defense. So I know there's been a lot of excitement, and I get it on Bo Jackson, but at the same time, I'm trying not to overreact to kind of the things that happened in the second half. I think there's some things to take from it, no doubt about it. And I think you saw some signs from Bo Jackson and Riley Pettijohn and Zion Grady and guys like that. But trying to keep in perspective, not only was it Grambling, who was severely talent mismatched in that game, but it was a lot of Grambling's backups at that point. But can they get the run game going against OU? James Peoples, CJ Donaldson, that is, that's a group that they need to, and they were better last week, no doubt about it. OU is allowing 109.5 rushing yards per game, which is tied for 56th nationally. Actually tied with Penn State, interestingly enough. So can you get that run game going? Can James Peoples hit a couple of these? I've been waiting for him to kind of get one that's like, there's the big playability that we've heard about. I think CJ Donaldson's been effective. I'm surprised a little bit that he hasn't gotten, sort of a Quinshon Judkins longer run type. Not that they're the same player, but, in terms of being the power back, you don't expect him to have a ton of huge runs. But I did expect him to have a little bit more, especially against maybe not against Texas, but especially against Grambling. So I'd like to see both of those guys get off and, have a little bit more, explosion to their game. Just look like Ohio State running backs. It just hasn't quite got there yet. And I mean, look, last week against Grambling, 8 carries for James Peoples, 5 for CJ Donaldson. So it wasn't like they had a ton of opportunities. And a lot of times, as I'm sure many of you know, with running games, like you wear teams down, right? And over the course of a game, you wear down the defensive line, the linebackers, and eventually you're able to start getting bigger and bigger chunks. They didn't really have that opportunity. Now, should they have needed it against a Grambling defense that they certainly overmatched? I think you could make that argument that probably not. But I do think there's something to that, as the game goes on. And, they obviously wanted to throw the ball. I mean, Julian Sayin in half threw the ball 19 times. So, we'll see. I'm also interested to see what Ohio State does in terms of pace of play. Obviously against Texas, they slowed things down. It looked a lot like it did during the regular season last year offensively. But then against Grambling, when they knew they'd have opportunities and could really make some plays, especially in the first half, they were going. There was tempo. They were going fast. I thought Julian Sayin seemed to flourish in that. Again, against Grambling, they leave the best receiver in college football open for an 87, whatever it was, yard touchdown, then again in the end zone. So, not the toughest of things to challenge him. But I did think, that helped him get into that rhythm that we saw when he was 16 of 16 and finishes 18 of 19. So do the Buckeyes go to that tempo again in this game, or do they kind of go with a more balanced approach like we've seen in the past? So, I think there's plenty to be interested in this game. A night game in the shoe. I wrote earlier this week, I don't think this was the night game any Ohio State fan was asking for, but I do think it will make for an interesting atmosphere. I'm sure there will be plenty of OU fans tailgating on campus, in the crowd, all that, because they get this opportunity to come here. It hasn't happened since 2010, and that should make it won't be Tennessee, but I think it will make it for interesting. And if you're out on campus, I assume you will see plenty of people in green. So I think there are some interesting things that could come out of this game. Obviously, the most important is Ohio State going out, handling its business, and moving to 3-0. I think you'd love to have another convincing win to add to that Grambling win, and obviously the Texas game. Just to keep building and keep the confidence high. You're going into an off week next week before you head out to Washington. So if you're able to, get a comfortable win, get the backups in again in the second half, I don't know if you'll go as deep as you did last week, but I think there will be that opportunity, assuming you do things the way you're expected. And I expect that they will. My headline on, I guess it will be Sunday morning after the night game, is Buckeyes keep rolling, handle business against Ohio University. I think, like I said, I don't think it'll be 70-0, but I do think that, there's a reason Ohio State's a 30.5, 31, 32.5, wherever the spread is right now, favorite. And, I think this team is taking the right approach to this. Obviously the Texas game had everyone's attention, but I think now you are, you saw exactly what you wanted to see against Grambling. They didn't come out. There wasn't a slow start. There wasn't any messing around. They went out, took care of business early. Even when the backups came in, boom, boom, boom. There were no major issues, right? And I think you'll see that again against Ohio. And, I think you'll feel pretty good when you're done watching that game on Saturday night. And, then you got a week off to watch everyone else. And then we get an interesting test against Washington, which we'll obviously talk more about, but the first road test of the year. So I'm going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you again to Bill Kurelic, not just for coming on, but for everything he's done for Ohio State recruiting over the years that he's done this. And thank you to Garrick Hodge. Really excited about Garrick. Bill's a legend. Garrick has big shoes to fill. We have more coming on the recruiting front, I do believe. But Garrick, I think, will do a great job. I liked his work at 11 Warriors quite a bit. He was someone, when I was asked my opinions on replacing Bill, he's a guy whose name I brought up right away because I think he does a really good job. I think he's a hard worker. And I think if you are somebody who has learned to appreciate Bill's coverage, I think Garrick is going to do things in a different way, but I don't think you will see any sort of drop off in terms of quality, the number of pieces they write, all of that. Garrick is definitely going to be able to fill that part of it. But like I said, he will do his own way, which I think is important. I don't think he should try and pigeonhole himself into being Bill, and he won't. It's not like this is his first rodeo doing this, as he mentioned. So thanks to him for coming on, and we'll see how it goes Saturday. But night game in the shoe, stripe out. So you're supposed to wear certain colors. I'm looking forward to it. I think the Buckeyes should keep rolling, and we'll be back next week with an off week podcast. I do believe there's a chance I take next week off from the podcast, but there are a couple guests I've been trying to get on, and maybe next week's a good time to do that if we can make it work. If not, we can also come up with some other things. As Bill said, we could just keep reflecting on his career. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, YouTube, please hit the thumbs up button, turn on alerts with that bell so you get all of our video content, including our podcasts, and on your podcast app or platform. Please leave 5-star review, comments for us. That is all appreciated. Cheers, Buckeye fans.